All right, Blake, welcome. Thanks for coming and joining us. Why don't you tell us who you are, what your background is in aviation, and maybe give us the you know 30,000 foot overview, so to speak, about Boom.
Yeah, well, I'm Blake Scholl. I'm founder and CEO at Boom Supersonic. Our mission here is to bring about a renaissance of supersonic flight, ultimately to enable a lot more people to go to a lot more places, to create a lot more travel opportunities, and to do that, for everybody from the president on down to every family. So that's the big, hairy, audacious goal that will keep us busy for some time to come. My own story, people ask me like, "Oh, you must have come from Boeing or be an aerospace engineer." I'm not. I don't have the resume for this. I But I do have the passion for it. So I throughout most of my childhood, I remember being jealous of my friends who got flying lessons. I got to start flying for fun when I was in college, while I was going to school for computer science, and I sort of had a first career in tech at Amazon, a few startups, then Groupon. Um, where really everything was getting faster and better, but our airplanes were not. And I never got to fly on Concorde. I think I spent about 10 years with a Google alert on Supersonic Jet, just kind of wanting to know when I could buy a ticket and go break the sound barrier. And very long story short, nobody was doing it, but it was possible. And so I figured I should make a run at it.
It's great. It's great. So you all have had some pretty big milestones in recent months. Why don't you tell me a little bit about those?
Yeah, one of our first decisions was, this is a brand new company building what is going to be one of the most challenging airplanes ever built. And so we thought it was smart rather than to go straight into production on a 400,000 pound Part 25 safety critical supersonic airliner, that we should take our design concept, scale it down to one third scale, go design, build, fly, learn. And that's what was the genesis of the XB1, which just completed its flight test campaign hugely successfully. And so there are many firsts on XB1. It is the first civil supersonic jet to fly since Concorde in 1969, which still blows my mind a little bit. It's the first one made in America. It's the first one built not by a nation state. Every other entity that's built a supersonic jet's been a government or military or government sponsored project. Um, and most importantly, it's the first built entirely out of airliner ready technology that scales up into an airplane that we can certify, that you and I can ultimately fly on.
Very cool. So there's this concept that you all have been discussing. It's the boomless supersonic flight.
Yeah.
As we know, the sonic boom can not, maybe it's not super fun for some people who are dealing with it. Can you tell me a little bit about that and how that all works?
Yeah. Well, we didn't start out with this as one of the goals, actually. We said, look, we can actually solve a whole lot of passenger problems flying supersonic across oceans and right under the speed of sound over land. So, think Seattle, Tokyo in 4.5 hours, think crossing the Atlantic in 3.5 to 4 hours. There were hundreds of routes on the planet, and many of the longest, kind of most dismal ones, where you can get a big speed up for passengers without ever flying supersonic over land. And so the sonic boom is kind of a non-issue. But of course, when I tell people you can get from New York to London in 3.5 hours, the first question I always get is, well, how long is New York to San Francisco? Can we fly faster across the continent? And so a thing that has been well-known physics for a long time, something called Mach cutoff. We demonstrated we can do it reliably now. And so we flew XB1, broke the sound barrier 6 times, every time with no audible boom. And the way that works is it's not actually the design of the airplane per se, but how you fly it. So just the same way light refracts, it bends. Drop a pencil in a glass of water. The pencil looks broken because the light bends when it goes through the water. Sound bends when it goes through the atmosphere. And so if you fly the airplane high enough and at the right speed, the boom kind of comes off the airplane at a shallow angle, and it turns as it goes through the atmosphere, and it curls back up. And so it goes kind of up to space rather than down to the ground. And what that means is that there's no audible boom for anybody on the ground. And this works at speeds up to about Mach 1.3, or about 50% faster than today's airliners. So we can fly boomless up to 50% faster. Exact speed will depend on weather. And then over water, we open up the throttles, we go 2 times faster. And so, interestingly, what that means is if you take off from New York, you can go east and be in London in 3.5 hours, or you can go west and be in San Francisco in 3.5 hours. So that would mean, like a morning departure from New York eastbound, the time difference works against you, but you could still get in London in time for a late afternoon meeting or a dinner. If you want, turn around, come home the same day. Or you can go west, an 8 a.m. Takeoff from New York will touch down in SF at around 8:30 a.m. SF time.
Wow. Wow, that's yeah, that's that it makes sense. You know, I I think among the flying public, maybe not us folks in aviation, but certainly among the flying public, there's this feeling that Concorde had this demise after their accident, which is maybe part of it, but not really the whole story. So, as the supersonic expert that you are, I'd love to hear why you think Concorde kind of fell by the wayside, and
Yeah.
what Boom can kind of do different.
Well, I think Concorde was stillborn, and the best evidence of that is only 14 were built. Right? It's not like there was hundreds or thousands of these things and they had to shut them down. It never got to scale. Long before there was ever any accident. And by the way, that accident had nothing to do with flying supersonic. It ran over debris on a runway.
Hmm.
Um, could have impacted any other airplane. Just Concorde got unlucky that day. So why did it never really take off? Well, the answer was here was an airplane built by two governments whose goal, France and Britain, whose goal was to show up the Russians, not to build an economically practical airliner. And one of my controversial views is Concorde killed supersonic flight, and Apollo killed space exploration. And when I say that, people usually say, "What?" Uh, but imagine yourself in 1969. There's a moon landing. There's a supersonic airliner flight, and you stop somebody in the street and you say, "Well, do you think in 2025 what's space going to be like, and what flight going to be like?" Nobody's going to tell you that neither of those things will be possible anymore. So what happened? What happened was enormous amounts of money into developing products with no sustainable economic model. Like Apollo took a percentage of GDP, and nobody even pretended that like there was an economic model to go to the moon. And in Concorde kind of pretended, but here's an airplane with 100 uncomfortable seats and a $20,000 ticket, and it's like 1970s. You can't find 100 people that want to drop 20 grand to go somewhere. So it made no sense economically. And then the world, out of these kind of big, expensive government programs, the aerospace supply chain kind of got fat and dumb and inefficient. On one hand, on the other hand, the world drew all the wrong conclusions. The world drew the conclusion that supersonic flight couldn't be economical, but that's nonsense. It's utter nonsense. If supersonic flight is safe and affordable and comfortable, everyone wants it. So the question is, can you make it those things? And the answer is happily yes, especially 50 years after Concorde was made, and we now have all kinds of new technology that we didn't have back then.
Right. How do you shake that perception, though? I'm just curious. Like, 'cause you nailed it. Again, people like us in the aviation space don't. The crash was due to thought. Everybody knows that in our
Mm-hmm.
world. But again, the flying public, like you said, might feel uneasy
Yeah.
about supersonic. How do you shake that?
I think ultimately we just have to do it and earn our reputation. Like, the some people will be excited to get on the first flight. Some people will be excited to get on the second flight. Some people will be excited to get on, after there've been a whole bunch of flights. And our safety reputation, which is really, right up there in the mission. Our goal is to foment a supersonic renaissance, but our top priority is safety, and we want to raise the bar on that. And our safety reputation is going to be the one that we earn. And I think about that every day. The team thinks about that every day. It was a huge focus in the XB1 program because sometimes people talk about XB1 as like it's like supersonic flight's Falcon 1 moment. And it's sort of analogous. Falcon 1, that was the first SpaceX launch that got to orbit, and then they scaled it up and they made the Falcon 9. But the first three Falcon 1s blew up, and that was okay because nobody was on board. But if you got a person on board, failure is not an option. And so not only did we work on safety technology, but more importantly, we worked on safety culture. And we learned what it takes to build that, and it's and what it takes to maintain it. And the single most important thing I learned is you got to love your whistleblowers. Safety culture is about how leadership responds when somebody says, "Hey, boss, we got a problem," and the answer starts with "Thank you."
Yeah. Yeah. It's been a big topic recently in aerospace. Um,
Hmm.
you know, but I want to talk to you about everybody's favorite topic, government. And I'm a big follower. I follow you on X, and seen recently you made a trip over to DC. Uh, I think the White House, potentially the Oval Office, was included. Am I right in that visit?
The airplane made it into the Oval
Okay,
Office.
gotcha.
I can't personally say more than that.
Okay,
But yeah, the president loves airplanes. The notion of an American-made supersonic airplane. Uh, Frankly, the president's not the only one that gets excited about that. It's hard to find somebody who's not excited about that. And the idea that we can legalize supersonic flight over land, that it could be done without an audible sonic boom, that's hugely exciting to just about everybody.
yeah, yeah. So it sounds like what you're saying is you're getting, some support and accolades from the White House, the current administration.
I mean, we're getting support basically every phone call I make,
Gotcha.
both sides of the aisle. Like, many things are controversial in DC right now, as we all
Yes,
know,
yes,
and there are lots of things a lot of people don't agree on. But would it be better if flights were faster, especially if they don't make a sonic boom? Everybody agrees about that.
gotcha. So I want to talk about, the regulatory side of the house. What are you kind of seeing, maybe feeling from the DOT
Hmm.
and FAA as you move
Yeah.
through the certification process?
Well, the most important thing about Overture, and this surprises people, people say, "Oh, we're building a supersonic airliner. Oh, it must be made out of unobtainium. There must be a whole bunch of new technology on it." And the answer is actually it's not. This is a supersonic airliner made out of 20-year-old, proven, already certified 787 level technology. This is a carbon composite airframe. This is turbofan engines, twice as many of them. It is digital flight controls. It's fly by wire. Great. All that's been done before. The FAA knows how to measure the safety of it. The rules are well established. We just got to follow them and prove that we did it correctly. And so, with one exception, there's no regulation we're trying to get changed. We don't need safety exemptions. We don't want safety exemptions. We're not looking for noise exemptions or emissions exemptions. We publicly committed this is going to be a stage 5 airplane from takeoff and landing, a quiet operation perspective. So, if you live around an airport, if you're an av geek like us, maybe it's
Mhm.
disappointing because, boy, it's fun to hear afterburners. Sorry, we don't have
Yeah,
them. It's
that's
going to be
unfortunate.
quiet. You're not going to know the difference between this and any other large airplane. Um, and so for that reason, there's an enormous amount of scrutiny from FAA, as there should be, about did we get all the engineering details right. And I welcome that. Someone should be looking over our shoulder, checking our work as we do it, helping us learn from history about what works and what doesn't work. That's a great industry regulator way of working together. But we're not saying we need exemptions or rules or new rules or whatnot, with the exception of, hey, if we fly supersonic over land and nobody on the ground hears a boom, we think that should be allowed.
Yeah, yeah. So tell me about, we're looking in, we're, well, we're almost in Q2 of 2025. What do we expect in 2026 from Boom?
Yeah. So a year from now, we'll have run the first prototype of our Symphony jet engine, and that's the first. So XB1 was the first independently developed supersonic jet. XB Symphony is the first independently developed jet engine. So that'll be up and running, making thrust, and we'll be a few months away from starting the manufacturing process in the very first Overture. So it'll be on the order of 3 years before we get to see an airplane in the sky again. Those of us who love seeing things fly will have to hold on a little bit, but we'll get to um, watch the engine come together and then get to watch the airplane come together. And one of the things I've learned along the way is we got a lot of people who want to see this work. And so we kind of, I tell the marketing team, imagine you're just kind of cutting a portal in the side of the company and putting a nice big window in there so that everybody who's excited about what we're doing can just peer in and see it happen. So we'll be aiming to do that and share lots of things along the way.
Gotcha. So you mentioned symphony. I forgot to bring that up, but I think it's worthy to talk about because propulsion is a huge part of your project here, right?
Mhm.
Can you tell me more about the engine and how
Yeah.
that's playing out?
Yeah, so we decided to do our own engine, and it's uh, one of the best decisions we've ever made. And people say you can't build a jet engine outside of one of the big three, and we'll find out pretty soon whether that's true. But the most important thing about Symphony is we get a customized engine that exactly matches the airplane versus having to take something off the shelf and kind of shoehorn it. So this boomless cruise thing we're talking about, we looked at that when we were looking at Rolls-Royce engines and it didn't work. It broke the sound barrier at too low of an altitude for that U-turn to really work. And so we shelved that. And then as we started working on our own engine, what we found was it very naturally we could tune it for better transonic performance. And what that means is it can fly, much better right around the speed of sound, which is key for making boomless work. You got to break the sound barrier at a sufficiently high altitude, and then got to be able to fly efficiently at speeds from about 1.05 to 1.3 Mach. And our engine can do that far better than a shoehorned subsonic engine. But what is this engine? It's not a new kind of engine. It's a turbofan. Those have been around, I think, since the 1940s. It's a turbofan that's tuned to match Overture's needs. So a supersonic airplane, it wants a bigger core. That's part of how you get more transonic performance, and it wants a smaller fan. The fan's got to be big enough to be quiet for takeoff and landing, small enough to be efficient at high speed cruise. The overall compression ratio is lower because the intakes. I think a lot of people don't realize is the jet engine itself is all subsonic. By the time the air hits the front of the engine, it needs to be going about half the speed of sound. So the engine intakes are, which on subsonic airplanes don't do a lot. On a supersonic airplane, they are no moving parts, supersonic air compressor, and they feed the incoming flow as smoothly as possible to the front of the engine at about half the speed of sound. So because that compression is happening in the intake, there's less compression that happens in the engine itself. So the propulsion overall pressure ratio is like what you'd see on any modern subsonic propulsion system. However, the what's in the turbo machinery itself is reduced because the intake is doing part of that work.
Gotcha. So, talking about engines, talking about airframe, where are you building all this stuff?
Yeah. So we are the engineering design team is in Denver, and that's where we've got our sort of prototyping shop, our systems integration shop, and then our rate production for the Symphony engine is in San Antonio, together with Standard Aero, and our super factory, which is where we build overtures, is in Greensboro, North Carolina, at the Piedmont Triad Airport.
Gotcha. The factory, I think I saw a press release. It's almost done, or is it finished, or is it started? I can't
Yeah,
remember.
we did a ribbon cutting last year,
Gotcha.
and actually the facility itself got done substantially ahead of schedule, which is not something I expected. And so we're in the process of kind of getting the airplane caught up with the factory, and we'll start assembling the first airplane there next year.
Gotcha. So, kind of my last question here, but obviously you have the airlines. There's a couple of them that are interested, or that have basically committed, right, to Boom. Can you tell me a little bit about that? I know United's one, American maybe two. Um,
Yeah,
but are there any more you're looking at, or any other stuff you're
yeah.
eyeing?
United and American have orders with non-refundable deposits, meaningful non-refundable deposits. And Japan Airlines has a pre-order. All of that orders and pre-orders adds up to more than 5 years of production. And the way I look at it is, if we had a warehouse full of these jets, they'd fly out of it tomorrow. Everybody from a passenger perspective wants faster flights. We can do it at fares three-quarters less than what was charged on Concorde. So I think 5,000 round trip across the Atlantic. Um, and that's a huge market. That's people are already paying those prices in business class today. So that's roughly 80% of the market potential for international is right there in business class. And yet when we talk to customers, 97% want supersonic flight. I think 3% click the wrong button. But most remarkably, 87% say they would switch airlines to get it. Right. So imagine a world where United and American have supersonic across the Atlantic, and just say brand X doesn't. A lot of passengers are switching airlines, and when they switch airlines, they don't just switch the handful of flights that are going to be supersonic on day one. They switch their loyalty, which means they switch all their domestic flying as well. And I think that is the biggest, competitive disruption that the industry is going to see since the dawn of the jet age, where the same thing happened, with the early adopters of jets and the late adopters of jets. So I think that's what's going to play out. And, ultimately, every major international airline is going to need supersonic because their passengers want it. And if they don't have it, they're going to go fly a different airline.
Well, competitive advantage, right? Um, I don't expect you to get into the weeds here, but I think there's a lot of naysayers out there, we'll call them, that that say maybe these commitments by these airlines are sort of just press release moves and that sort of thing. But there's sounds like you're telling me that there's meaningful financial commitments to this.
Yeah, I mean I think it's worth observing. The naysayers never change the world on anything,
No, yeah,
and there's always somebody saying you can't do things. And by the way, there's no guarantee we'll succeed. We've overcome a lot of hard problems to get to where we are. We've got a lot more hard problems to overcome to get finished. There's no guarantee we'll get there, but I'm certain that it's possible. And that's what makes me and the other hardworking men and women at Boom get up every day and say we're committed to figuring this out. And when there's a challenge, we focus on getting over, around, or through it. Um, and the and we're incredibly grateful that United, American, JAL were willing to throw in with us, like, actually remarkably early. And I particularly am grateful to United, which made the first non-refundable deposit. And not only did they put money in, they put their brand in, and not only did they put their money and their brand in, but they put their people in. And the Overture development team works hand in hand with United's test pilots, with their ground crews, with their maintainers, with their flight attendants. And they whenever we do a design review, United sits with us in the design review, and we talk about the airplane openly. We talk about what we like and what we don't like. We talk about how you're going to fly an approach. We talk about the cockpit, how that works, how pilot training is going to work, how you cater the airplane, the economics, and so this I think is when we look back and from the day of success and say, well, why did it work? One of the biggest answers is going to be we didn't develop the airplane in a vacuum. We did it with our customers right there with us, making sure that when we delivered an airplane, it didn't just like sound good on paper, but in all of its details, was actually great.
gotcha. So wrapping up here, we're talking a lot about airlines, but is there an opportunity for the Boom technology to maybe go even further? Business aviation, military. I think you mentioned when we started something about the president.
Yeah, I mean ultimately, I want supersonic flight for the president, all the way down to every family. And the one of the central challenges was really where to start and then where to go next. And where to start is, Overture's an all business class supersonic airliner designed for passengers who would fly business today to get a big speed up, particularly on the longest, most painful international flights. That's where where the bread and butter is the North Atlantic. That's what our 1.0. But just like Boeing has a whole family of subsonic airplanes, ultimately we're going to have a whole family of supersonic airplanes. And because people are going to fly more when flights are faster, we're in success. This has to be a bigger company than Boeing, because people are just the same way we needed more jets than we needed propeller craft. We're going to need more supersonic airliners and subsonic airliners, as they continue to scale and the economics continue to get better, et cetera. And so, there will be subsequent airplanes. There'll be bigger ones that support lower fares. There'll be smaller ones for private use. There's a very long roadmap ahead of us, and the art of doing this really is to pick the right first thing to do and really focus on it and get it done successfully.
That's great. Well, hey, thanks, Blake, for coming on and joining us. I know there's a lot of people out there rooting for you.
Well, I appreciate you, Ryan. Thank you for that.
Thanks.